I don't want to promote prison, but sometimes I think that if anybody, um, you know, gets into similar circumstances, she will understand why it's so bad, to think that your life worth nothing because it worth everything.
Mm,
And in prison, you understand this. Yeah, it's a tough way to understand this,
mm.
but now every minute, every hour of my life, i it's just full of sense.
I'm Thomas, and this is The Mirror in My Cell. My normalish life was interrupted when some stowaway cannabis of mine reappeared at a Belarusian border checkpoint. The charge would be for 3 to 7 years. I was forced to witness myself and understand the power I do have. Now I want to meet the others who've been changed by incarceration. This week I spoke with Lisa, who is a Russian music artist, and she's actually currently right now on trial in Armenia for drugs charges where she fled after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. She basically took the fall for drugs possession in a nightclub, and in a very cruel twist of fate has now been strangled by this whole situation for multiple years now. But in my mind, is still navigating the experience with utmost grace and dignity. Listening it back makes me remember some of the feelings that I felt when I was like coming out of prison, and realizing how people have been responding to the letters and reflections that I was making whilst I was in prison and sending those out, and feeling very confused when I realized how much impact it had had on people and how let's say inspired people were by kind of the thinking that I'd been doing. And this conversation with Lisa kind of like really reminds me of lots of that, because she's simultaneously like such an incredible and inspirational person who's making the most out of a situation which is continuing to be just such a dark and crazy and uncertain one, but equally like very, very normal, and dealing with pain and uncertainty that is not unique to people that have gone to prison, dealing with feelings of entrapment or lack of control that are absolutely not unique to someone who's gone to prison. And everyone will know someone who dies. Everyone will face crises in their life. And it's almost a question of like giving yourself the credit of dealing with those moments with the significance that they deserve. And I think Lisa does that in a really cool way. And it's very inspiring that she's still in the middle of her court case. It's still ongoing and can still hold some of the like most fundamental truths about what it is to navigate life well in the forefront of her mind, and still do really cool things with herself. So that's what this conversation made me think about. She kind of like warms up over time. I think the beginning of it, I was like, oh no, how's this going to go? But by the end of it, it's turned into like one of my favorite conversations so far. And she's a very inspiring person whose album you can check out on Spotify, which she's released, and who you can follow on social media as well. She's still in the middle of everything, so that's what she's posting updates about that. And I would encourage you to do that. Lisa, здравствуйте. Nice to chat with you. We had a little talk just before I pressed the record button there, but I was saying that it feels like we've kind of got two, like if the story is a big like smashed mirror, then I feel like we've got lots of pieces from the same mirror maybe. And yeah, I'm really excited to talk to you about it. So as you explained it, you're Russian originally, but you're
Yeah,
no longer in Russia, and that you left Russia after
that's
the
true.
invasion of
Yeah.
Ukraine, right? Do you mind explaining like what was going on in your life, what was important to you, and what made that feel like the right decision to leave Russia at that time?
Everything was going quite well. I was studying my master program within sound art, and I had a nice work in the Contemporary Art Museum. Um, and then everything just crashed, like in one moment. Um, because I remember when it was a morning, and I heard that the war has started, and my ex-boyfriend, I woke him up, and I just told him, "Okay, the war started." And um, actually, it was almost an immediate decision to leave Russia. Um, and so the war started on 24th of February, and on 3rd March, we've already left. Um,
Wow.
yeah, and we went to Armenia, mostly because he didn't have the foreign passport. Because I think otherwise we would go to Georgia, not because it's better or something, but just because there were more people in that moment. But I would say I stuck. Firstly,
Mm-hmm.
in a good way. Like I had my closest friends with me, and we were renting a house together. And it was fun, but a bit crazy because everybody, all the Russian
Okay.
people who moved, whom I know, um, they felt very stressed. Maybe it wasn't that obvious, but in a year or two, everybody just looked back and they understood um, how terrible actually they were feeling. Um, and
Mm.
yeah, for me, the second year has become an accepted year because yeah, I went to prison. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, probably that's the beginning of the
Mm.
story.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Was that decision to leave motivated? Was it just like from personal circumstances, or was it almost like a ideological thing that you felt like you didn't want to be in Russia anymore? Were you scared about how it could get worse? Were you scared it could spiral out of control? What was that
Um,
decision
it was a
motivated by?
mess. I mean, it was both
Mm-hmm.
ideological and emotional. It seemed that it's like, the final point that you could stand staying in Russia. And yeah, I have kind of a leftist circle around me. All the people are quite against the war, and somebody was following the situation from 2014 and never visited Crimea afterwards, etc. Um, I cannot say that I was so radical about it, but and that's why I'm a bit surprised that the start of the invasion became so important to me. Um, so yeah, it was both ideological and emotional. Like I just felt that I cannot stay in this country anymore.
Mm. Crazy that such a big decision happens in such a short amount of time. Well, I don't know. That's the kind of leaving a country. That's probably the for most people who leave the country that they're born in and live in. That's probably a decision that like takes years and years to be decided upon, and then you've done it in a week. That's crazy.
Yeah, I just remember maybe one night or two nights before the war started, I was sitting on the kitchen with my friend, my neighbor, and we were discussing that no way, it's not gonna happen. Putin is not that
Mm,
crazy. He understands that it will, like lock all the international
mm,
relationships. And that's also why we were very
mm,
shocked because um, there were people who, they understood uh, even that time that it's real and it's gonna happen. But I was hesitating, and so did some friends of mine.
Mm. And kind of in the build up to the war and like in your young life, what role was escapism playing? Like, I'm from Berlin and I lived in Berlin for 5 years or so, and it's an interesting mix in Berlin because you have it's a very like political place in some ways, but also I don't know if they're like the opposite ends or they're part of the same thing almost. But like obviously the like crazy escapism and hedonism and drugs and partying is very connected to that world, in part of escaping from the system, but also imagining a new system, imagining new ways of relating to people or new ideas. That's all very connected in Berlin. Was that, and obviously that's a very like leftist world. Was that also a world that you were part of in Russia?
Um, at some point it was, but I think it wasn't connected that much to politics because, as I imagine, in Berlin it's way more connected than it was in Moscow. And I have many friends who moved to Berlin, and actually, I think most of my friends moved to Berlin, and I was going to move there
Mm-hmm.
too. And I applied for a visa like 1 month before everything happened. Um, and yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I kind of failed
Yeah.
myself.
But that's interesting that you talk about it not being super connected, because I also had that feeling in some ways. Like, you have these huge protests in Berlin where everyone comes out and they bring these huge speakers and play techno, and everyone walks through the streets and kind of like does drugs in between like bins on the street or whatever. And then in theory there's like a political reason for everyone to be there, but like in actuality it's an excuse for that kind of behavior somehow. But I do have a lot of sympathy for the urge to escape when the real world gets too stressful and too oppressive. So if you say that it wasn't like connected to politics, then I think that's totally fair enough, even maybe like more fair enough than trying to connect a night out with like a political ideology. But was it like, was it important for you, or was it a big part of your life? Because that's then part of the story of how you ended up in prison, right?
The thing is that I was visiting one place, a club that my friends opened, and it was a good place. Mm, Like, we had nice film screenings there, and there were really good parties. And um, the thing was that the place didn't have any
Mm-hmm.
money, and it was like self-organized. Um, and yeah, another problem was that there were actually many drugs. How do you say?
Yeah, a lot of drugs.
A lot of drugs. And at some moment, it was hard to avoid this just because I think you understand that when you, for example, spend a night at a club, um, um, you became sleepy, and for example, you don't want to drink anything, and then something like speed appear, and you just okay, I will consume it just because I want to continue
Yeah.
partying. I cannot say it was, maybe it was the escapism, but it seemed more um, like I was lost, and it was hard to understand how I should leave. Um, so I was just doing what was year. I also got a boyfriend, another one. It was a hard relationship. It is, and she wasn't. She couldn't leave Armenia, so I just stayed there too. However, I think that in other circumstances, I would leave it way earlier, maybe to Georgia or to Serbia, because many people without European visas were carrying or these more options. But I didn't. So it was my mistake. I can say that I probably forgot myself, so lost myself. No, I think even later, in 1 year.
So just
it was messed up.
just to fill in the gap between leaving Russia, and you moved from Russia to Armenia, and then you were kind of just like collecting yourself for a little bit and starting to build a community in Yerevan in Armenia, and then that's the point where you're saying you were kind of a bit out of touch with yourself and just, I don't know. I definitely recognize what you're saying about kind of just responding to life in the most immediate way, like not knowing how one day connects to the other is how I started thinking about it, where it was just like, it's just one day and then another day and then another day, and the things that fill that day, like it doesn't feel like they've got much to do with me or what I want somehow, but I'm going along with it all. That was definitely how I had been relating to life in Berlin for a long time, I think. But that's the headspace that you're at in Armenia.
Yeah. Correct.
Yeah.
And of my normal life, I was working in the media. It's like that the colonial media I told you about. And right 1 week before everything, I left. And for that week, I wasn't in a good mood. And maybe that's why I lost control of the situation. I think you understand me, that it felt like some destiny or something like that, because all the elements around you, they're like collapsing in one terrible situation, which you cannot control anymore. But it felt like I was suggested by some signs around that, okay, you need to leave. It's the nice moment to leave. Leave. And I didn't.
Leave the party, you mean?
And yeah. And I didn't. And then everything that happened.
And that's basically, you're in an environment with like drugs around the place, basically, and then the club gets raided by the police, basically.
Yeah. Actually, they came 3 times, and I was arrested in the 3rd wave. Later, a friend of mine, he told me that he like foretold or something like that. Yeah. So he told me that he warned me, but I don't remember this, because if I knew, I would have left, definitely. And yeah, it is.
And just before we kind of like start talking about your prison experience, do you mind quickly saying, because I think it's a big part of the story for me, or a lot of what I ended up thinking about was like, what's my what's my responsibility in the world? And I think I was very, very exposed to like the fight against authoritarianism and kind of like state violence based on most of the people that I spent time in prison in Belarus with. And it very much changed how I understood like an individual's responsibility in the bigger picture of making the world move in the right direction. What was your understanding of what your job was regarding like the fate of Russia and the political situation in Russia, or just on what level were you understanding your responsibility to be a good person?
Wow.
Yeah, sorry.
I don't know, it's fine, but it's an interesting question. I think before the prison, for me, it was about to make things feasible, and make some donations, because I didn't know what else to do. And I did this regularly. And after prison, it has changed a little.
Okay.
Yeah, so making things visible was kind of the most important thing for me that time.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I think that is one of the best ways to, that is one of the ways that people enact their political power on the world, isn't it? And I think it's, a very important one for sure. So you're arrested in Yerevan. What happened in your brain as you realized?
It was hard to realize that something like this happened to me, because I think I'm the last person who should have appeared in this situation, and that was very hard to bear. And like I needed kind of 5 or 6 months to finally accept that everything's happening. When I was released from prison, I read on the internet that there's wood for such people like me and actually many other who was arrested. It is pryanik.
Pryanik.
Pryanik. I don't know how it's sounds in English. We'll check. Like cookie or something like this. Gingerbread.
Okay.
Spice cake. I don't know. And it means a person who just entered the prison, and he or she believes that he or she or they is going to be released soon. Like now, for example, I've got a lawyer, he will help me, etc. But it never works, because most people leave prison only after 6 months or similar. So I was a pryanik.
Yeah, I think maybe me too, except no one ever told me the word. That's like gingerbread. Okay. Trying to work out what about it is gingerbready. But yeah, I was definitely in that headspace. There was a crazy moment as well. I guess I'm going to have to put this story somewhere, but like turning up and realizing and kind of like meeting my cellmates for the first time, and like about half of them are political prisoners, half of them have been there, and me just being like, oh my God, guys, this is really bad. Like, I can't believe that like the situation you're in, like this is terrible. And they were like, you're here too. Like, and I'm just like, no, like, no, it's bad for you guys. But that was
Yeah,
your headspace.
yeah. I think that here the situation differs just because, in Belarus, the authoritarian regime is very strong, and there are actually too many political prisoners. In Armenia, it isn't like this. In Armenia, uh, people are imprisoned for drugs, for killing somebody, for I don't know the word in English again, like stealing
Yeah.
money or something like this. So yeah, I discovered myself around these people after 7 days of isolation, where I went completely crazy and I was crying constantly. And yeah, everything seemed so terrible, like the food, the environment, because the building was very old and dirty. Yeah, I was shocked. But then you get used to it.
And what were you, if you had to say, like, what were you crying about? Or what, when you were sad, what were you sad about?
To be disconnected from the world, I think that's the worst thing. And that time, 2 months of imprisonment, seemed to be like the end of the world. And I thought, okay, 2 months, I will survive this. But yeah, in 2 months, nothing changed.
And you were with like female prisoners, right?
Yeah.
And were you sharing a cell with how many people?
Firstly with 2, then with 3, then again with 2, then again with 3.
And they
Yeah, so I
spoke.
changed my room.
Did they speak Russian?
They did, yeah.
What was your relationship with those people like? Because I remember being also in that, like flying in and just feeling like it was so not my situation. I don't know, just like it felt like a story about my universe and me, and it was so awful that I was in this place. And then you sort of realize as well there's also other people there as well, and they're also crazy shit has also happened to them. And even, I mean, maybe their whole life has been just one big crazy fucked up story. Like, I don't know, you had a very fucked up week probably, but maybe they had a fucked up life and now they're here. Like, how did you get to know those other people, and what happened to you when you started knowing them?
My first 2 neighbors, they were one woman from Georgia. She was accused of killing a taxi driver. And she was, by that moment, she had been in prison for 5 years already.
Wow.
And the second one was a strip dancer from Russia, from Khakassia. And she was pretty Putinist girl. And so I was obliged to keep silent because, it's not a good thing to have some problems in relationships with your neighbors. And I was just feeling so disconnected because we're like from completely different universes. They knew nothing about what I know, and their situations were different
Mm.
because, as I told you already, I I've never felt guilty, and it just felt like a big, big mistake. In their situations, it was different. Um, and the first shock wave was just because I left this isolator where I spent 7 days, and I came to this room with a woman who was there already for 5 years. It was just like, oh my God, what?
Mm.
And you immediately see how people behave after 5 years in prison, and it made me sure that I need to act
Mm-hmm.
in any way I can do in prison. I need to maintain the human inside me,
Yeah.
like uh, because it's very easy um, to become nothing.
Mm.
Yeah, it's a bit tough, but I think it's the fact to
Mm.
become nothing in prison, because you have this tough times and you need to do something, and if you don't, you're kind of dying
Yeah.
in this terrible place.
Mm.
So I almost immediately started to read books, to to try. I was trying to remember my German.
Mm.
I was like studying a lot, and I did yoga and some other
Mm.
exercises. Um, and it had become the center of my life, I think,
Mm.
just doing something and never considering what is around
Mm.
me. Now, in that room, it was hard because it had a TV, like really old one, and there were 4 Russian channels. All of them are, very governmental and propagandistic. Um, yeah, and sometimes it was hard to do what I wanted to do, like reading or
Yeah.
something, because yeah, for some reason in prison people watch TV a lot. Like they find the only way to fill their timeline with the
Yeah.
TV, and that was also awful for me. Yeah, I just didn't want to become this.
Mm. That's super interesting that was. And was it that woman who'd been for 5 years in prison that made you realize a lot of that straight away? Um,
Yeah, that's true. She actually had very tough times. Like, um, her husband, he was in prison too. Um, and um, after some time, he put the ink in his
oh,
eyes,
whoa.
and he became blind. Uh, and she was released from prison, like then invalid. Do you
Yeah,
say
yeah.
so? Is it polite to say
Yeah.
so? Uh, and yeah, and he was visiting her because here in Armenia, you can have like a long meeting with some family member. A long one is 3 days and separate camera. And yeah, after 2 months I spent together with them, he died because he had some problems with his health. Um, and I just remember her like on the first day when the news came. Mm, she was very silent and crying. And then maybe in 2 days, she has already became better, just because, I think she felt like there's nothing to lose anymore. And yeah, it was also so hard to contemplate. It was just too harsh. So she didn't have a lawyer, and I cannot say that she had any support there, like an appropriate. Her family was in Georgia, and I don't remember if they visited her at least once. Maybe not. Um, yeah, that's the thing about that woman.
And what was it like living your life alongside that life? Because like you said, you're so different and your whole lives have been so different. What's it like living 1 meter away from someone whose life is like that and is going like that?
So with her, it was fine. I was, I felt very bad about her. Like, I really wanted to help her. And in these first months, you're ready to help everybody, because you understand that everybody felt like you feel right now. And also the actually interesting thing is about crying. I noticed that in prison, almost nobody cry in public. I mean, in public, they have like 2 or 3 people, because it's unofficially forbidden. Because when you start to cry, you trigger some button, and people start feeling worse, because they try to get rid of all the thoughts that are connected to their, destiny, which they're experiencing in this exact moment. And when somebody starts to cry, they just feel very bad, because they remember everything they went through. So yeah, I remember then one Iranian girl came, and she was constantly crying, and I was trying to calm her down, and I was very kind to her. But after 2 months of her crying, I actually started feeling that, okay, maybe it's time to stop crying. You need to accept the situation, please, because we are all like this here. So yeah, I have become less sensitive too.
And what was your relationship with crying like? How often were you crying, and what purpose did it serve for you?
In the first 2 or 3 months, constantly, but I went to the toilet to cry. And then I went out, and I was already smiling. And then I think I just got some meditative condition, and I just got some stone inside me, and it was very hard to pierce it. And I think that's how people spend many years in prison. The stone just becomes is just becoming it's just becoming more solid. And yeah, you just understand that you needed to survive there.
So would you say that prison made you like less emotional then?
Yeah, I would say so.
Because I think it was the opposite for me, or at least like definitely crying or like feeling okay about crying was never something that I had done before, and never thought it was like a necessary tool with dealing with the world. But then there to be in like such a dark place and to be able to look in perspective at my life and be like, I'm not gonna feel bad for crying. Like this is definitely one of the situations where you should be allowed to cry in, and know then having it as just like I remember writing it in my diary once. It kind of feels like you just like scrunch up all the newspaper. I don't know if there's like a newspaper with all these articles and words and paragraphs on it. It felt like it was just the process of just like scrunching it up all into a ball and then just like setting it on fire was the like what it felt like to be crying in prison. And same as you, that was not being done in public. That was being done under a pile of coats in the corner of the room. But it always felt like it was such a necessary part of like staring my emotion, staring reality like in the eyes, and then being able to like move on was what like the crying allowed for. And I think that was a super nice thing. So it makes me, I don't know, like the premise of lots of these conversations, I think it put a very good light on prison in some ways. Like I think it sounds like it's a very spiritual thing for lots of people. It sounds like it's a revelatory thing for lots of people. But I think it's absolutely true that it is like, yeah, people ice over people. I don't know, you talk about the stone getting harder and harder, and I think that's very much part of it. How do you see that? Like, was there another side to you becoming like more of a stone, or like the stone getting bigger and harder? Was there also like a part of you that got softer or more gentle in some ways?
The thing is that I started to see all the events or everything that happened in my life. I started to feel that it wasn't worth crying, and it wasn't worth depression or any other condition when you start hating life, or you just feel that you cannot do something anymore because you are tired, etc. I have just become stronger, and it's actually a really good feeling. I don't want to promote prison, but sometimes I think that if anybody um, gets into similar circumstances, she will understand why it's so bad, to think that your life worth nothing, because it worth everything. And in prison, you understand this. Yeah, it's a tough way to understand this, but now every minute, every hour of my life, it's just full of sense. And yeah, as you probably noticed, I finished my album, which I wasn't able to do for 5 years because I was procrastinating in some way. And after I was released to house arrest, I just immediately started doing things. And yeah, that's a big change inside me because I wasn't like this before.
And so you spent how long in prison then?
I spent 6 months. Then I was released to house arrest for 1 month. But the prosecutor, he made this appellation. I don't know. Do you say
an
so
appeal,
in English? Yeah, an appeal. And yeah, and so they took me back. And there was again this isolator firstly, and then the room. And I spent 3 more months there. So it's 9 months altogether.
You spoke at the very beginning, like on the night that you actually got arrested, that there were multiple signs that came that told you it was worth leaving. were you able to, did you have the sense that there was anything that wanted this to happen for you, or made this a necessary thing for you as an experience to go through? Did it ever start making sense on that level?
I can say that in some moment of my life, I was kind of a spiritual person, and I was deeply into this stuff. And then I have become more materialist, and that was after the war. That was the most materialist period of my life. And I think that was a mistake. I actually thought that in prison I would start believing in God or something like this, become a Christian or something, but I didn't, luckily. But I still think that there's something like karma or some, I don't know, energies or something that, you need to listen to to your intuition, maybe. I would call it like intuition, but it doesn't grow from nothing. I think it comes from something, energies or something like that. And I started to be more attentive to such things. And I think somewhere inside, I'm also afraid that if I stop doing things, I will be beaten again by this power.
What do you mean beaten?
Well, put into prison again, for example, or in some other way.
Yeah, I remember there was like a church outside of our window that you could just see the top of, and I was like, this is gonna be tricky to fight this one. If I stay here long enough, I'm sure it's gonna get me eventually. But but I think, it's interesting. Yeah, I think I was exposed much more to like the metaphysical through my experience, and I think that was a function of having so much time and emptiness to like listen to stuff, and also, I don't know, it's hard to know whether you just kind of like invent the reason in the vacuum where reason isn't, even though materialism is so much more of like a logical and sensible way to analyze the world through. It is somehow incredibly illogical when you get to like nothing would mean anything if you if that was your only means of looking at the world, then nothing would make any sense at all. And so to let that be filled with something like something that we don't have words for, something that people put words to, and we kind of laugh and say that's a silly word when people talk about God or energy or love or panpsychism was what one of the people started talking about. It sounds so silly, but if the opposite is just only logic and materialism defines what happens, then that's much less like the world I live in.
But actually, you read many philosophical books there, so especially Bertrand Russell's The History of Philosophy or something like this. And so, there were all these ancient Greek philosophy and so on. And of course, it went a lot about metaphysical stuff. So I somehow connected. I think philosophy also made me more solid, more stone-like.
And would you say your prison experience was connected to the bigger story of your life of having fled Russia and probably not knowing when you'll be able to go home or when you'd want to go home? Did it make, I don't know, your life, like there's such powerful forces that is like forces way bigger than you have decided your little individual, the quality of your individual day. How do you, like, did you were you even trying to make sense of it? Were you trying to make them join up somehow?
I think you need to explain me better. What do you mean?
Yeah,
It's fine.
sorry. I don't know. Like, I think when I went to prison, I had the feeling like, okay, this is like an opportunity, and I see what my life has been like and how it's been going, and then this big external force has picked me up and put me in a crazy, crazy situation, and now it's up to me to decide what I want to do in this new situation or make sense of it. But that happened to you twice. Like, it was twice in a row that forces like way bigger than you picked you up and put you in an entirely new life track. Was I feel like one making sense of it just once for me was like such a big undertaking. How was it to do that twice? Did you try and make it part of one bigger story of
I think it's a bit related because the prison is my main story. I would say so. And now it's like I'm on the crossroads, and because my trial isn't over, and I still, I'm still in danger, and I still don't know how it's gonna finish. So I cannot even make any statement for me of what I earned or what I've lost, because it's neither of them. Yeah, I think that if it all finishes well, I will just continue living like my life has totally changed. I would even want to change my surname because
okay.
I just feel like it.
And would you say you're doing a good job of navigating that uncertainty? Because that is always the trickiest
I think
point,
I'm doing perfectly. Like, I have work, I have some projects to work on too, and now I have the album. I think it was the most important part of me being in this situation, that I wanted, even in the worst scenario, I wanted to leave something about me. And it was so important for me to finish this. And now I feel like, I did something big for me to exist.
Yeah, I'm very proud
you.
for you, of you, that you managed to achieve that. And it does feel like that's often, I think that's such a beautiful and positive place to channel that energy that you have inside of you, that kind of like, questioning energy that's squirting out, having all these forces like applied to you. Was the process of creating it a kind of therapy for you as well?
Yeah, definitely. But it's more like therapy of action, like everything that I do right now. It's about some activity and, not just lying in my bed and thinking about how faith is bad. And I'm kind of positive and aimed. I have goals.
You just said something which I don't think I've ever heard anyone else say, but like I think is one of the ideas that the world is missing the most right now, which you just said, like therapy of action. And I've never heard, like, when people say therapy, that means like sitting down and talking about it, thinking about it.
Oh,
It
no
doesn't mean
talking,
like
no thinking.
standing up and
That's
doing
a
something.
great mistake.
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
do.
yeah. Yeah, but no, like it seems like people don't know that. I don't know. That was yeah. I've never. I don't say this in like a proud way, but I've never had therapy, and even after Belarus, like people were saying like, "Are you doing therapy for it or whatever?" And I said, "No, I'm not doing therapy," but because I think I'm just thinking about things so much that like the thing to put effort into is doing, and I think doing the doing in a way that like fits into what's important to you, that reflects the thinking that you've done. I think it's very maybe I think a little bit of thinking. I hope you'd agree with
A
me on that
little
front,
bit.
that a little bit of
Yeah, a
thinking
little
is
bit is
allowed.
fine.
Yeah. But doing doing the doing that the thinking has pointed in the direction of is absolutely how people should respond to that lost feeling, that the feeling that nothing makes sense, or that they're not worth anything, or
Well, actually, nothing makes sense, but it's a normal thing, and you are the only source to create meanings. So that's why you need to be tightened to yourself. Yourself is nothing, but it's a nothing that you have to admit.
And I think it's super interesting as well, because that was basically the first thing you said about when you got to prison. That was the first thing you realized, like, I need to do things. Like, that is how I maintain a structure of who I am. That's how I like keep my integrity as a human. And I think, I mean, that's kind of what these conversations have been about, and like born from, in a way, because I think when you just like are like smashed into the ground, like that first moment where you lift your head up, you can see something like the first thing you see, like that's a very, like that's significant what you're looking at when you're in such a dark place. Like the first piece of light you see, like that's probably telling you something very, very significant, I would have the feeling. So it's really interesting that was the first thing that you saw, and that has kind of been one of the defining things that you're making life about and making understanding life about as well.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I don't know how. I just feel now that it should have happened. I don't want it to continue, but I've never regretted this experience. I mean, like I'm at house arrest firstly, and now I can leave home for some hours. All these days and months, I never had an idea that it was bad. Now it feels like it was just right, because otherwise, I think I could have been smashed by life.
I think it shows you to be a very, very strong person to have handled it like that so far and keep handling it like that, I think. So good work.
Thank you. I tried my best.
Yeah. And I think that will ultimately, like, that's probably a big part of being able to feel like it was not the wrong path to go down if you tried your best and saw an amazing person. I don't think no one will ever be sad to be in that position, looking back on a person that they're proud of and did exactly the kind of things that the person they would want to be did.
Yeah, I remember even calling to my friends from prison and sometimes I felt like I'm happier than they are. Because
Yeah.
people were constantly complaining about some life difficulties, and I felt like all the difficulties can be overcome.
Mm. Yeah, I started at one point. I was writing down every day. I figured I would like record. I would give myself a score out of 10, like being like, how am I doing out of 10? Like if I had to put my mental health on like a score from 1 to 10, how would I be doing? And I was looking at the numbers and I was like, there is no way I would, like, in Berlin with all the complaining I was doing, all the miserable journeys to work and stupid colleagues that I felt disrespected by, like no way would I be getting like 8 out of 10 like for 3 days in a row, like in the middle of winter in Berlin, like no chance. And then just just seeing myself so in control of who I was and what it meant to be me made that possible, I think.
Yeah.
Lisa, it's been so nice speaking to you. It's strange to be catching you. I wondered how the conversation was going to be different, given that you're still in the middle of everything. But if anything, I think it makes it much more powerful and like resonate a lot more, because there's also like that. I don't know. Sometimes, I came out and it was like I don't know. I didn't have to deal with any of the bad parts of what I had been through, and all it needed to be was like, oh, like I had this big journey and now I'm back, and now I'm wise.
Now I'm wise.
But
That's true.
to hear both,
That's how it feels.
but like I think it's even more powerful that it can, like, I don't know, that you still describe it. Yeah, you're still in the middle of it and there's still all of that uncertainty and fear and like pain of what it is, but you can still like hold that person up, which I think is super cool. Thanks for speaking with me.
Thank you. It was a good opportunity to tell some things.
Thanks for listening to The Mirror in My Cell. Consider sharing or subscribing to catch the thrice monthly conversations. Thanks.